All right, good day, everyone. This is Jason Strait with the Cloud Pass Virtual Group. We have the session here today, High Availability and Azure, Scaling SQL Server to the Cloud. Our presenter is Matt Gordon, and this is the presentation. Originally, we were going to do this 2 weeks ago, but we ran into some issues that had us reschedule it for today. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And let me just go through a couple announcements before I hand things over to Matt. Come on, go forward. There we go. All right. The sponsor for the virtual group is Quest and their Spotlight Cloud. Spotlight Cloud is the first Azure-hosted database performance monitoring solution focused on SQL Server customers, leveraging the scalability, performance, and built-in security of Microsoft Azure Cosmos DB. Spotlight Cloud combines the best of the cloud with Quest's engineering insights from years of building database performance management tools. This virtual group is part of a number of virtual groups that PASS puts on. Some of them are language-focused, like Global Spanish, Global Chinese, and some of them are job or role-focused, like data science and security. If you are looking for additional training, there's all of these out there that you can go to check out. Now, at this point, I'm going to hand things over to Matt and make him the presenter. And today's session is High Availability in Azure, Scaling SQL Server to the Cloud. Now, let me make Matt the presenter.
Good stuff. All right. Thank you. Okay. So thanks to those of you who dealt with the schedule change on this. As Jason said, I was scheduled to give this 2 weeks ago, and though it's pretty rare for me, I felt terrible, and I did not think you wanted to be subjected to the way I sounded that day. So here we are 2 weeks from now. Hopefully this is where you intended to be, and if so, thanks for joining me. Here's a little bit about me when my slides will actually advance. There we go. So I'm an architect for Insight DI. I'm on Twitter, SQL at Speed, and my blog is sqlatspeed.com. I actually just published a blog for the T-SQL Tuesday last night, so there's some fairly recent content on there and some good technical stuff as well. A little bit more about me. I've been working with SQL Server. I believe this is year number 18 right now. So I've come at it from a lot of different angles too. I've been a database developer. I've been a DBA. I've been an architect. I've worked on the storage side as well and making sure we were putting the databases on good hardware. So I like to think I've approached some of the things we're going to talk about from multiple angles. And now that I've been a consultant for roughly 4 years, you kind of get to see even a different angle there as well. One thing I want to call your attention to on this slide is I lead the Lexington, Kentucky PASS group. That's important for 2 reasons. First of all, we have some thunderstorms bearing down on my house. So if all of a sudden I go quiet, my power went out and I'm sorry. The other reason that I wanted to mention is I obviously don't know where everyone's from, but we're always looking for new speakers here. I think PASS envisions those local groups as ways to not only grow the community and grow the volunteer base, but to grow the speaker base as well. Getting involved in PASS about 6 years ago, to be honest, changed my life. It's given me a lot of opportunities to make connections that have advanced my career, friendships, salary, all those things. So I can't encourage you more to get involved in PASS. And if you're anywhere local to me, we would love to have you out to speak to our group. One thing, I think this is still true. I believe we're the only PASS local group in the world that meets in a brewery. So if you're thinking like, wow, I'm really nervous to start speaking, I don't want to stand up in front of a group of people and do any of that, we have some generous sponsors that buy beer. And I've always found beer makes me a little less nervous as long as you don't kill 3 or 4 of them during a talk. So if you're interested in speaking at all, my email is on the previous slide and the end slide as well. We would love to host you. And if it's not an hour, if you've got 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, happy to host you. And free beer. Like I mentioned, on Twitter, my handle is SQL at Speed. The blog is sqlatspeed.com. And I repeat all that just to give me an excuse to show this slide. So occasionally, for fun, I get to drive race cars. This has been a couple of them. And next year, I get to try out something a little different in the stock car world as well. So as much fun as I have talking about data and helping people out with that, I love to talk about racing even more. So if you're interested in that, it's the last you're going to hear about it here, but feel free to tweet me and all that, and I'll talk your ear off about everything racing related. So let's get into the stuff. So obviously with this being a virtual group, a slide like this is a bit difficult to pull off. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm just going to go by the questions, maybe leave about 15 seconds after each one, just to try to get a sense of the group that we've got here. So how many people are here attending their first time, or attending a virtual group for their first time? And if you are, just go to chat and type yes. Obviously, you can raise your hand if you want. I won't be able to see it. Okay. Now kind of into the more technical stuff. So how many of you are 100% on-prem as of now? You don't have anything in the cloud, nothing in Azure, nothing in Amazon, and you're just kind of here because you're interested in potentially moving. And like I said, I'll leave about 20 seconds for folks to type yes. Okay. How many are personally looking to utilize Azure, where it's not company driven, it's not manager driven? It's like, listen, I really need to understand more about what I can do out in the cloud, and how I can solidify my my environment and my job. Okay, and we'll do one last one. How many are here specifically because your boss, manager, executive, person in charge said, listen, we've got to be out in the cloud. I keep seeing all these ads. The cloud's amazing and it's awesome, and put all our stuff out there. And you weren't really quite sure where to start, so you attended this as a way to start. Okay, all right. Thanks for that. Let's go ahead and advance on to what we're going to talk about here. So what we're going to do, and I promise you this session is largely technical, but it's I'm a little bit sneaky here up top. So like I said, I've been working with SQL Server a long time, a particular interest in high availability for the last several years, because I used to support, before I got into consulting, a system that was 24/7, 365, and we had public clients. We dealt with states, and for some of the states, the system was very critical. So high availability kind of became an interest of mine because it had to be, and I learned a lot of hard lessons early on in that process. And one of those is, if you're coming to a talk that has anything to do with HA at all, one thing that's important to talk about, and we're just going to touch on it briefly, but while I've got an audience, I always feel like this is an important thing to go over, is we need to talk about the non-technical aspects, why it's important, what is it, how do we solidify the people and processes underneath all the cool technical stuff we're going to talk about after that. So those first two bullets here are pretty much just that. And then we'll go into the third bullet, which really these slides are more for reference. I'm not going to talk through them in great depth, but it's always surprised me how many different clients I go to where the DBA team maybe is only aware of certain HA options that SQL Server has. Maybe they're using only always-on AGs, but they didn't know about log shipping, or they've used replication forever, but they haven't, they weren't really plugged in anything else. So to kind of set the table for the back half of the talk, we're going to go over everything we can do on-prem now, because a lot of what this talk is, and you can kind of guess that by the title, is taking your on-prem environment that you're comfortable with and then extending that to the cloud and making those possible migration paths much easier. So we'll set the table for those, and then we'll go into the fourth bullet, which is hybrid HA options, which, to be honest, as a consultant now, that's most of what I'm dealing with. We do have some clients who say, listen, we want to shut our data centers down, get us out of there, and we're always happy to help with that. But the majority of the clients are, listen, we want to eventually migrate. We need to stretch what we've got to the cloud, get the team comfortable with that, and then go from there. But beyond the hybrid stuff, like I said, we do have some, you're starting to see more of this, where they're only interested in Azure. Well, your high availability options in the SQL Server realm in Azure are different. And so I'm going to go over those. We're going to start with kind of what some on-prem stuff looks like when you do it in Azure on VMs. And then we're going to talk about some things, some platform as a service offerings that are unique to the cloud and what you can do with those. I do say that there are takeaways and Q&A at the end. As we mentioned up front, questions are cool throughout. I don't know that I'll have a chance to look at them, but I should have some time at the end to go over those. And if we have more than I can handle in that time, it's a great excuse for me to write a blog, and I'm always looking for more excuses to do that. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So what is HA? So the official definition, and by official I mean when you Google it, it's the first thing that comes up, is it refers to systems that are durable and this is an important term here, likely to operate continuously. So it doesn't mean it will never go down. What we're trying to do here, and for the terms of our next 45 minutes or so, our goals are twofold. We want to minimize the downtime we have. So obviously you don't want it to break. When it does, you want that to resolve itself as quickly as possible. We also want to minimize the impact of necessary downtime. And I think most of us know the reality is for a lot of systems that you support, maintenance windows are important, whether it's for an upgrade to SQL Server, an upgrade to the database supporting whatever app, an upgrade to Windows Server, who knows? We know that's kind of part of the deal unless you're spending a lot of money to really, pay for it and get to a lot of nines. So we want to minimize what the impact of that is. And like I said, it may or may not mean the system is always available. I'll refer to some of the features kind of under the always-on umbrella. And while that's a fantastic marketing term, zero downtime is still very expensive to achieve. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about, well, this never goes down. We're going to deal with the reality of most of the customers that I have. So how do we set these goals? Like I said, this is an important and often lost part of this. So I've supported systems before where we ended up operating under an SLA that was negotiated by people outside the team. And that SLA meant we were afforded, I believe it was 20 minutes of downtime every 90 or 180 days, which is not a lot, obviously. And for every minute we exceeded that, the company could be fined $1,000 a minute. So pretty onerous. And that was basically dropped on the technical group as a surprise. We were not involved. We were never even consulted, like, hey, can you do this? How much money is it going to cost to pull this off? Let's talk to the client and kind of work with them. It was a sales and contract team that was completely separated from anybody technical. And they're just like, yeah, that sounds good. And it ended up, we came close. We were all really proud of the work we did to get there, given the budget we had to operate. But it made life very difficult. And there were a lot of late nights and a lot of high stress situations to get to that point. So these goals cannot be set in a vacuum. And whether you're at a company of a size where you can inject yourself into these chats, or this is something you need to go talk to your manager or an executive or whatever, this is a fight worth having. This is noise worth making, because you need to collaborate with operations. A lot of what we're going to talk about here relies on getting storage people involved, getting network people involved, things like that. They need to be a part of this because, even if we can keep SQL Server up, if the hardware struggles to stay up or whatever, that's going to be an issue. If possible, any customer-facing teams that this impacts, they need to be a part of this as well. And if you're in a situation like I was in where it's a contract, the personnel that are negotiating that need to understand that the technical group at least has to be talked to. And I know depending on the size of the company and things like that, all of that can be challenging to do. But like I said, it's a fight worth having. At least give your best to try to be a part of that conversation, and then the chips, will fall where they may afterwards. But if we don't do that, what can happen is, like I said, we were in a spot where we were open to some pretty debilitating fines if we had not done our job right. You can get sued. There can be some pretty dramatically bad things that happen if you don't get a lot of people involved in this and set all those expectations for everybody up front, both in terms of uptime and budget and all of those things. And we can't forget the customer needs here as well. Obviously, depending on the business, the nature of the application you're supporting, who needs the data, all that, customers may or may not be important, or they may be internal, or they may only be, from 8 to 6 or something like that. But it's important to have all those conversations up front before we even get into any of the technical stuff. And that's why it sits at this place in this talk as well, because it's our responsibility on the technical side to take any information we can get that I've just gone over and then set those expectations both in meetings and in writing as well. This is how we're going to do it. This is how much it's going to cost. This is the hardware and software we need, or the addition of SQL Server we need to make all this happen. And here's what you can roughly expect in terms of downtime, maintenance, things like that. That's on us. And so I think that's really important whenever you're talking about anything to do with HA. Another thing that's important here as well is, even though we're going to spend the next 40 minutes talking about software and all the cool stuff we can do with it, it's not only a software decision. We need to choose the technology and design that's supportable by our team. So if we've got a great team of really senior folks and everybody's awesome, then we can get pretty advanced. And anything we're going to talk about here we can do. If we have a smaller team, and maybe it's a lot of junior folks and you, if you have no team and it's just you, then those decisions may change. So it's, the technical decision isn't the only thing we're doing here. We need to make sure that we can handle it and we can support it going forward. Even if it looks great on paper and sounds cool, if we can't actually support it, or we struggle to keep it running because it's complex, that's not where we want to be. That's going to lead to a lot of late nights. And the processes around all this are really important. So here's another part where, if you could see me, I would be standing on a soapbox here. Whatever noise you have to make to get any approximate test environment for this stuff, do it. Because especially when we're getting into the advanced stuff like always on AGs, FCIs, things like that, costs a lot of money. You're buying a lot of nice hardware. You're buying a lot of SQL Server Enterprise licenses. None of that's remotely free. It is you need to put a test environment in as part of this. And it doesn't have to be exactly like prod, but it has to be somewhere. So when somebody comes to you and says, listen, we need to perform this maintenance, we need to do an upgrade or whatever, how long are we going to be down? You need to be able to give them a realistic answer. And if production is the only environment you have that looks like that, the only environment you have where that solution's out there, then you're giving an educated guess at best. But in my experience, even if you're in a meeting, you're in an email thread, whatever, and you say, I don't have a place to test this, but my estimate is 30 minutes of downtime or whatever, in the postmortem, if something goes sideways, that I don't have a place to test this but always gets lopped off. And it's, well, the DBA said it would take this long and it didn't. So obviously they're the issue. And we don't want to be in that spot. We know that's not true, but sometimes you have to control the messaging as well. So if you have some place to test this, you have a run book, you have a defined process for failovers and things like that, you're going to be a lot better off regardless of what option you pick in terms of HA. And last but not least here, before we get to the tech stuff, personnel are important. Obviously, if you're building out a team, if it's more than just you, you want to get the best people you can for the budget that you have available. But another key thing here is you may have great people, they may not be very experienced, and you getting them in touch with the right kind of training is going to help too. It's not all talent, some of it's coaching, right? And so what we need there is, and there's going to a SQL Saturday, attending groups like this, there's great resources out there for free. There's also still, good training and things like that. So depending on budget and what your company likes to do. There's no right or wrong answer there in how to teach somebody something, but if they're weak on what we've selected in terms of an HA structure, we need to get them to where they're not weak. Okay, having said all that, let's get to the nerdy stuff. So, like I said, these slides are mostly for reference. I'm not going to go over these in great detail, but it's every HA option that we have in SQL Server on-prem as of now. This doesn't touch, so 2019's structure gets a lot more complicated. Here I'm talking basically 2017 and back. So we won't get into big data clusters and things like that. It's very traditional, old school SQL Server. So you don't often think of replication as an option for HA, but it is. And all of these slides, kind of the first slide of the section has a diagram of what it looks like. Like I said, that's there for your reference. I'm not going to talk through exactly how it works. If you want to know, let's have a question at the end and I can revisit some of this. But what replication does is what it says. It copies data and database objects that you select somewhere else. So if you want data to be highly available, this was kind of the original way to do that. What are some ways we might use this? Well, these are kind of, the top two are kind of the classic stories we've heard. You've got a report server somewhere else. Kind of famously, reporting queries aren't always the most efficient. They're often hard on the hardware and things like that. So we replicate all the data somewhere, give the reporting folks a report server to hammer away at, and then our primary database that's serving that app is happy, and it's got all the painful stuff going somewhere else. It may not be exactly real time, but you can get close-ish. So depending on what those needs are, this can work. There's also where maybe you've got a remote office downstream somewhere, and it's the classic. They have a server under a desk. The connectivity may not be good. They don't need real-time data, but they have some processes they run where they need data maybe on a daily basis or a couple times a day or something like that. So you could use snapshot replication to just get that data down to them. So the data in theory is highly available at very low cost, and then they can do what they need if the primary office goes down or something like that. What I'm seeing more and more of is people using replication to get the data somewhere where they can kick their ETL off from there. So it keeps ETL processes off the primary box and gives them somewhere, again, a box they can beat up, and the primary is chugging away doing its thing. So all of these are kind of the classic scenarios for that, and we're keeping data highly available by doing all of these. What are some pros and cons here? So it does have a decent GUI. The GUI hasn't changed a whole lot in a long time, so it's certainly not fancy, but it's fine. You don't have to pay extra. This will work on standard. This will work on express, whatever you want. Some of the things we're going to talk about later, enterprise, is you need it. For this, you don't. So cost is good, and most of us are not working places where money trees grow out front. So that's an advantage here. You can also, to some extent, control the frequency and amount of data replication you're doing. Now, the con there is the data filtering for this sometimes is not always great from a performance standpoint. So depending on what you require there, think about that. There's no automatic failover out of the box. I have seen some scripted solutions that are a little kludgy, but it's not automatic natively. You would have to put some work in. And the other thing, and I've experienced this personally, is if you have a complicated replication topology, the administrative effort on it can be pretty crazy, especially when it comes to upgrades and things like that. Generally, you get to a point where you're scripting both the burn down and the reset up of it. So think about that if it gets really complicated, and a lot of these kind of grow organically where somebody's like, well, I need these 3 tables over here, and then it gets into this whole crazy two-way thing. Think about that, because that can be hard on us, especially if you're trying to change any structure in those objects at all. Log shipping. This is underrated, and this is the one I see a lot of times where I'll go to a client site and they have solved an issue where they're using always-on AGs or something like that, which are really cool, but log shipping would have done it. And so what this does, this consists of 3 steps. Log backup. You then send that to one or more secondaries, and then that backup is restored there. That's it. You can set up a monitor server. It's optional. I do recommend it because it gives you access to a lot of data to see what the status of your environment was at any point in time. So if somebody says, hey, I couldn't get this data, what are you doing over there? You can go say, well, okay, the backup was restoring, so that's why you couldn't get it. But without the monitor server, you don't get quite the level of logging and information you need basically to tell people if things were actually down or not. So I would recommend that. Here is what it looks like. Again, pretty straightforward. What are some pros and cons here? So it's the first thing we've talked about that's a database-wide DR solution for sure, and arguably a high availability solution as well. It does grant you possible read-only access to the secondary databases, which is nice. If you're in a setup where you need to set the delay between the backup and restore and you don't want it to be automatic or instantaneous-ish for whatever reason, you can do that here. The cons are, like I mentioned, the secondary data is only available when the replica is in standby status. So what that means is when it's restoring the log backup, during that restore process, nobody can go look at that data. For most people that I set this up for, that's not a big deal. It's more of a user training thing. And generally the log backups are of a limited size where you can it's not a big deal. It's 10 seconds or something. But if you're in something where people are like, listen, I need this all the time, then setting those expectations, again, here is very important because this is low cost, but it's not quite the instantaneous coolness of an always-on AG, but it's far less complex. You do have manual failover only here as well. Again, you can script automatic-ish failover. I don't recommend that for this either, but it's doable. The other con, depending on the attitude of your Windows folks and attitude of your security folks, the permissions required to move these backups through the network can be broad enough where some of the Windows people get a little nervous. So that's just something to think about. If you've got things set up right and you're using service accounts and all that, pretty limited threat. But it is something I know enough admins. I've been in enough places where every once in a while they're like, wait, you're going to copy a file from here to here, and this is an account that I don't own. So it's just important to be able to explain how that works and why we're doing this. And generally it's to provide near real-time access if people need it without the cost and complexity of any of the other solutions we're going to talk about after this. Mirroring. Don't use this. No, that's not exactly true. I've debated taking this out over the years because in SQL Server 2012, Microsoft said, listen, we're going to, we're eventually going to take this out as officially. But what happened is the new Microsoft, even when they deprecate things, it doesn't come out of the product. It just says, hey, don't use it, but it's still there. So they do recommend avoiding this feature for new solutions, as do I. It does still exist, SQL Server 2016, 17, 19. So it's still there. Are there some reasons for you to use it? Yeah, we'll get to that in a couple slides here. So how does it work? Very similar in structure to the way always-on availability groups work, and we'll talk about those next. So your log records, it's not a backup per se. It's your log records are sent from the principal to the mirror, and there's an optional witness server similar to the monitor server with log shipping, which does give us the ability to do automatic failover. So it's the first time we've talked about this. Why would you use it? So you would use it in a scenario where automatic failover is absolutely required, but always-on AGs and FCIs are for some reason not feasible. If you need high safety mode that ensures basically nearly no data loss, this is the first thing we've talked about there, where we can have some configuration options that almost guarantee we won't lose things. There's certainly edge cases where things could go sideways, but if that's a requirement, you can't use AGs, FCIs, any of the other stuff we're going to talk about. You could do that. The primary use case is really this. You're supporting an environment that's 2005 or 2008. And really, if you're supporting an environment like that, it's important to understand, obviously 2005 has been out of support for a while. 2008 R2 falls out of support here on July 9th. So we really need to be working to get off those environments. And if that's the case, actually, like I said, I don't know where everybody is, but I know PASS and Microsoft are co-sponsoring these modern migration tour events. We did one here in Kentucky last week, but they're pretty nice events. There's about 2 hours of presentations straight from Microsoft on both migration options and new features in SQL Server 2019, and then a pretty decent set of labs to walk through kind of some realistic migration scenarios. So if you're sitting here looking at this slide and saying, oh man, we've got these 2008 R2 servers and I don't know how to get off them, those are one option. But back to the talk at hand here. This is why you'd use these. Again, I recommend not using it for anything new. So please don't. But it does still exist. It is still there. So let's talk about the stuff. We're ratcheting up the complexity here quite a bit. So always on availability groups, for those that are not familiar with what these are. They are basically containers, and I don't mean containers in the quote modern sense. I mean containers like it's a box for sets of databases to fail over together. So, you know, it's pretty common to have an app where maybe there's not one giant database under the app. There's a user database for security. There's an app database for something else. And and there's other small ones that support different functions and features and all that. Those generally need to behave and travel together. And we didn't have a way to do this before Always On AGs came to us in SQL Server 2012. Despite the excellent marketing around this, they're not always on by magic because you have these set up. They can break. I have whole talks I give on not only the mistakes I made setting them up over the years, but just some maintenance tricks and things like that I've learned. So if you're interested in these, there's a lot of great resources out there beyond just mine. I won't go too deeply into all of that here. What this really is we just talked about mirroring and that we're not supposed to use it. And that's largely because we're supposed to use these now, because this is mirroring on steroids. It's, kind of a lot of the same basic stuff under the covers made much better, much faster, and a lot more powerful as well. So we can do multi-database failover here, compression of the log traffic as it moves to the different replicas is built in. That traffic is encrypted as well. So where maybe the security people get nervous that we've got, if we've got log shipping set up, we've got log backups flying around. This generally makes them less nervous. One of the really undersold features of this here is you've got automatic page repair as well. So if a page becomes corrupted anywhere in the group, it will be recorded in a DMV that the page is corrupt there, at which you should monitor that. But it will call out to all the other and say, hey, my copy of this page is screwed up. If any of the other replicas have the version that I just broke, please send it. And so and I've worked on systems where that's happened. It's really cool. It saves you a bunch of downtime, a bunch of headache. You should monitor the DMV where that stuff's stored, because obviously if you're having corruption regularly, something's not well, whether it's storage or something like that. But really cool, underrated feature of this. You can also build these out at a scale greater than anything we've talked about now. So in 2016 and later, you can have 8 total replicas, and 3 of those can be synchronous. So we're able to build these out at much larger scales than any of the other stuff we've talked about. And really, once you have the cluster and the group built, adding nodes is not that bad. So what are some pros and cons here? This is the first time we can fail over databases in groups. There are flexible failover policies here, so we can set thresholds of this, basically things in the event log of a severity level, whatever. We could say, fail it over on this and not that. So we have control over how dire the circumstances have to get before we do this. If we're on SQL Server 2016 or later, we have basic load balancing. Now it's just round robin. It's not health sensitive at all. So if there's a replica that CPU's on 99% and it's getting hammered, if it comes up next and in the round robin, it's going to keep sending it there. But for the most part, it works well, and it's included. We don't have to buy a device or anything like that to do that. We also get database level health detection here as well. So if, like I said, you have an application where there's 5 different databases that support different parts of that app, if one of those goes down, if the storage underneath one of those goes down, if you've got 2016 and later, you can configure the group with database level health detection on. And what that means is if one of the databases in that group goes, it'll fail the entire group over. And then you can go research what happened. It didn't used to work like that. So this is another nice feature that, lets the system respond to the issue and lets us respond to what the underlying cause is. What are the cons? So it relies on Windows Server failover clusters. So like I said, this is where you involve operations, network, things like that. That can be complicated. Certainly adds layers to this. In general, there's a lot more data moving around your network than there was before, so that needs to be properly designed and scaled, and those expectations need to be set among the groups. This does require Enterprise Edition, so everything else we talked about didn't. This does. So a lot of additional costs there. And you do need to revise your database maintenance procedures as well, because if you're doing anything like an index rebuild or something like that, it puts a lot of load on the transaction log. You really need to change the way your maintenance processes work. Always on FCIs, this is in here for reference. I think I've given this talk maybe 15 or 20 times, and I've only ever seen one hand go up for somebody running these. So if that's you, definitely hit me up in the questions here and we can talk more about this, but I just want people to know this is another feature kind of under that always on umbrella that does exist, but it's not getting a lot of use. So we've talked about everything that's on-prem, and that's important kind of as a baseline, because a lot of what we're going to talk about here in this section is extending those where likely you already have something set up and you can extend it into Azure. So you've got your footprint out there, you can kind of dip a toe in that water a bit, and then it opens up migration paths and all those sorts of things for you down the road. This is all stuff I've seen. So this is not stuff that I went and looked up and said, oh yeah, this will work. This is stuff that I've either set up or gone somewhere to fix. So let's take a look at those. Kind of the most basic is this. It's not super exciting, but it works, and it's a good way to begin to get familiar with Azure. So all you're doing is you're replicating to a database on an IAAS VM. So it's a VM in a data center that Microsoft owns. It's not yours. The only difference really is that. This is, you probably need some light interaction with your networking team, perhaps your Windows team as well, depending on how Windows authentication is set up and kind of how they want to see the Azure footprint behave. But this is, in my opinion, the easiest way to say, yes, we've got data out in Azure. So if it's something as simple as, your boss came to you and said, listen, in the second half of this year, I want to have a database out in Azure, and your bonus rides on that. This is an easy way to do that. You're, again, just dealing with a VM, which probably 99% of us spend our days in anyway. It's just not in a data center that you own. This one's a little more interesting to me. So I feel like Azure SQL Database suffered a little bit. When it came out, the T-SQL surface area wasn't probably what most would want it to be. And so it kind of got the reputation of, hey, it's not really SQL Server. It's kind of SQL Server, but it's out in Azure and it doesn't do all the same stuff. It is SQL Server. The on-prem product and the cloud product have gotten much, much closer to each other. These days, a lot of the bits, if you go download 2019 CTP3 now, if you go grab that, a lot of the bits in there have been running in Azure for months. So it is SQL Server. It does count. So if you've got replication set up and you have an issue where, listen, we need some better high availability, maybe our other quote backup data center is that server under the desk that I mentioned earlier, and that's not great. We want to get it somewhere where we have better availability possibilities, then this is a way to do that. So, and normally this is where I would actually have a demo of this, but because this is a 60-minute session and not 75, I don't show it. If this does interest you, I have a step-by-step walkthrough of this. So if this particular slide, you're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to dive into this. I can help you out with that. So you can email me. I'll have that up right at the very end. I can send that off to you. This is also the first time we've really talked about anything that's platform as a service. And that's really where you get into a lot of the coolness of the cloud and some of the options we have that are beyond traditional on-prem, traditional IaaS type things. So this, you know, if you're already using replication heavily or using it for something important, I recommend doing this. I think this is pretty easy to set up, and then you have a reason to go look at the past stuff, and you have a reason to go out to the Azure portal and poke around. So I think that one's cool. Like I said, log shipping, this again is pretty straightforward. It's kind of similar to the first slide in this section. If you need copies of data stored completely off your sites for some reason, whether it's a customer that requires, listen, the data centers have to be 400 miles apart. This is one way to achieve that. If you're in the East, put it in US West or vice versa. Again, the setup's pretty straightforward here. Maybe a little bit of interaction with your Windows and network team to make sure you're accessing Azure from the corporate footprint in the appropriate way. But other than that, they can kind of leave you on your own to do this. And we don't have to build a cluster here. We don't have to do any of the stuff we're about to talk about. So this is cool. And again, a straightforward way. So like I said, going back to the kind of asking about the group here, if you're here because your boss said, part of your bonus or your raise or whatever rides on us having some data out in Azure somehow, replication, log shipping to IaaS VMs, very straightforward way to tick that box. You're not really into a lot of the cloud coolness, but that's okay. If you're fortunate enough to be running always on AGs on-prem right now, extending those to a replica in Azure can be a really cool way to start using the cloud in a broader sense. You can stretch a cluster out there. It'll be a good exercise for your network team, for you, for all those things. And I have a little bit of a story about this. I went to a customer once. I was out there as kind of a basic health check for their always-on AGs. And they had a good team, pretty robust infrastructure and all that. And their two data centers, unfortunately, were about 80 or 85 miles apart on either side of a river in the Midwest that often floods. So you can do the math and probably figure out roughly where those were. But they had a customer very interested in their services, wanted to buy their software, wanted to write a check with a lot of zeros. But that customer had a requirement that the data centers, primary and backup, or whether they're, if there were 3 or 4 even, one of them needed to be about 400 miles or farther apart from the other ones. And so they came to me in the middle of this health check and said, listen, is there a fast way to do this? We can't go build a data center, finding a good co-load partner and things like that is hard. They were in a matter of days trying to get this signed up. And this is what we did. They had AGs running under all the different versions of their product, a networking team that had a good understanding of clusters and things like that. And this was a very natural transition for them. And they since used it as a stepping stone to migrate a lot of their data out into Azure. But they were able to sign that customer up, get bonuses, raises, all that stuff. So a lot of this stuff really matters. It can hit our bottom line in positive ways. But this is another way to stretch what you may have on-prem out into Azure in a fairly straightforward fashion. And a lot of places I go, people don't realize you can have an AG replica out in Azure. They think it's kind of one or the other, and that's not true. It's both. So those are the hybrid options. So what we're going to do with about our last 10 minutes here or so is we're going to talk about the high availability options that are Azure only. So if you've come here and said, listen, I just want to know how to put all this stuff out in Azure and get the most that I can get from it, this section is for you. If you were interested in hybrid options, that was the last 10 minutes, and we can revisit that during Q&A if you want, but we're going to move on to this. One thing I would recommend before diving into this, if you're new to Azure, you've never seen the portal, or you haven't done much with it, definitely get comfortable working in the portal, get comfortable spinning up resources in Azure and things like that before you dive into some of this, because some of it is pretty complicated. So what's the first thing we can do? So you'll notice this says Azure only HA options, but I'm referring to always on AGs, which is something we just talked about as being an on-prem option. Well, it's both. So if you have VMs set up in Azure, you're on a prem, you're just not on your prem. And so we can set up always on AGs, but there is some differences here. So, and we won't, you could have a whole talk about just this, but just some highlights here. A domain controller is required in Azure to support the cluster. Now, if we're talking SQL Server 2017 or 2019, arguably you don't need a cluster for an always-on availability group, but arguably then that availability group is not highly available. You're just scaling reads. That's a topic for another day. But as you think about how to build this out, you're going to need a domain controller that these machines can access. If you're networking and Windows people have already taken care of that, and you have VMs out in Azure already, you probably won't have to worry about this, but if not, it's something you'll need to concern yourself with. There are templates in the Azure VM gallery where you can build this out. So I'm going to have a slide here. The next slide talks about all the different components where if you're building an availability group in Azure, it's different than what it may look like on-prem, even though it's called the same thing and kind of looks the same from the outside. It's a little different. These are all unique components. So if you want to see, if you don't want to build all these, if you're like, oh, I want to see this, but it sounds like a pain, the link on this slide, and I'll send the slides to Jason so they can be uploaded and you guys can grab those and click on links if you wish. There's a template that builds this correctly. It probably doesn't adhere to every best practice, but it'll do all this for you, and then you can go poke around and see the different components and how they're set up and all that, so you could build those on your own. So what you'll want to do, you'll want to put the clustered machines in an availability set. You'll need a VNet set up. You'll need an internal load balancer. It's required if you're using a listener, and you should. So if you're setting up AGs, you're not using a listener, you're really missing out on things like read-only routing and stuff like that are a lot of the handy features of always-on AGs, giving it the ability to redirect reads and things like that. So definitely use that. And like I said, the link is there to build one, and then you can dive into that. I think it builds about 29 different objects. You can go in and look at all those. And there's also a diagram where it kind of shows you, like, here's what I'm about to build, and here's how it's all wired to each other and all that. So there's a little more here. So I know probably not a lot of folks using FCIs, but I want to highlight something specific if you're thinking about that. If you have FCIs on-prem and you're one of those few, you'll go to the Microsoft documentation for this, and it will say, here are 3 ways you can set this up, and all 3 work, and they're fine. It's not true. So for the one of you out there maybe that wants this, I can save you a bunch of headache right here. So you see the 3 options listed: 2-node FCI using Azure VMs with attached storage, and storage spaces direct to do like virtual SAN. You've got 2-node FCI with something like Sios data, and then you've got 2-node FCI using Azure VMs with a remote iSCSI target using ExpressRoute, all those sorts of things. Storage spaces direct is not recommended in Azure. The performance is not very good. There are many better solutions than that. So do not take that documentation at face value if this is something that you're interested in. And that's a perfect segue into what I really want to do with the last 7 or 8 minutes here. Is so far we've talked about what we might have on-prem. We've talked about ways to extend that footprint out into the cloud, but kind of leave the structure largely comfortable and as something we understand. But why are we trying to get out to the cloud? What's our motivation? Is it a raise or a bonus like I've talked about? Is it to modernize our infrastructure? Is it to decrease costs? There are, in my experience, and I think this is becoming more and more true as a lot of the platform as a service offerings mature, if you're just lifting and shifting your on-premises infrastructure and you came to this session wanting to learn how to do that. I feel like we've gone over that, but I also feel like you need to think long and hard about why you're doing that because especially the platform as a service offerings I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes give you some really nice options to change your structure. You're not saying, well, we have 8 always on AGs and I just want those out in Azure. Think about why that is. If you're just trying to get out of a data center that you're trying to mothball or something like that, fine. But some of these PaaS offerings are going to give you the guts of what you have at decreased cost and less effort for you, and that's something to think about. So let's dive into that. Like I said, Azure SQL Database, I felt like kind of got a bad name up front. Maybe it wasn't quite ready for prime time when it was out there, but that reputation with some of my customers has lasted because when you bring it up and say, listen, why don't we use Azure SQL DB? A lot of the maintenance and all that stuff is going to be handled for you. The response you get back is, well, that's not SQL Server. It doesn't support everything we need. It's largely not the case, though it to some extent was earlier. So the T-SQL surface area is nearly identical to on-prem now, so that's no longer a concern. I've highlighted what I think and what most of my customers think are kind of the two gotchas that may keep you from using Azure SQL DB. So if you've got a lot of cross-database queries that use 3 and 4 part names, Azure SQL DB is not going to play well for you. It doesn't support those. There's some things you can do with elastic pools and stuff like that to kind of approximate it, but it does add complexity. And you don't have SQL Server Agent. So if you're relying on Agent purely for a lot of scheduling and things like that, it doesn't have that. Now, out in Azure, you've got Scheduler, you can use PowerShell, all those sorts of things. But if you're relying on kind of that traditional agent setup and that's what you're comfortable with, it doesn't have it. What it is providing us here is an SLA that's decent, that is probably better than most of what we're doing on-prem. So for the basic, which is very cheap, standard and general purpose service tiers, they separate compute and storage and give you, 99.99% uptime, which is pretty great. What premium and business critical do is they co-locate the compute and storage. So performance where it might be just okay on those lower tiers, when you get to the higher tiers, it's pretty good. And what I really want to highlight here is in those higher tiers, what the design is it's very similar to an always-on AG under the covers. So you're getting that complexity without having to set it up, without having to manage it. It's just sort of happening. And then, of course, you've got all the reasons that PaaS things are great. You've got automated patching, backups, all those things. And you're not having to set any of it up. And there's even additional options you can add where the HA doesn't happen by magic, but parts of it do. And that frees us up to do our job and maybe make code faster and make things run better and things like that, where we haven't just lifted and shifted some server we've actually made our life easier and freed us up to do more things with our data than just keep it up. So if that sounded cool, but you're like, well, boy, I really want that experience of working with an instance. I need agent. We have a lot of stuff that does that. I don't like PowerShell. I haven't written a lot of it. I don't want to mess with that. You can go to Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, which doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. That's what it's called. So what this is it's basically Azure SQL DB, but you're interacting with it as an instance. So it's going to be a very familiar experience to you, where people that are new to Azure SQL DB start talking about databases on a logical server and all that. It can be a little bit confusing, though it's not too bad. This is going to look a lot to you like I'm connecting to an instance to a server to do some stuff. You're basically getting on-prem enterprise at this layer, and you've got all these PaaS offerings. So you're dealing with it in a way that and you're getting the automatic patching, the backups, HA, like I said, to an extent is built in. As you get to the higher service tiers, Microsoft will generally financially back those as well. So if you're concerned that, listen, if it goes down, it's out of our control and that makes me nervous, they do back some of those higher service tiers with paying you back for for whatever the downtime might have been. And they are working hard on tools to make this easy. So you can use the data migration service, which is pretty slick, to get your data up into this. So you're not spinning up servers, and you're not spinning up all the other structure that you need to. You're just, I have my SQL Server database. I want it out here. You can use something like DMS to do that. Last but not least, and we've got 2 minutes left, so that's good. This is pretty new, but Azure SQL DB Hyperscale is awesome. So for us, it looks and acts just like Azure SQL, but it gets us past some of the performance limits that the kind of all the other service tiers could encounter with things like transaction log throughput and stuff like that. Hyperscale is a completely new storage infrastructure behind the scenes. It's really, really cool. This is set up for very large workloads. So if you want to go play with it, your database is 5 gigs, probably not worth it for you. But if you're up into the terabytes and things like that, this is definitely worth checking out. You again get all those platform as a service advantages, but it gets you over the performance hump that some clients with a lot of data have experienced with some of the Azure SQL DB and managed instance lower tiers. This is very, very cool. And like I said, it's new, but it's something worth looking into if you have a lot of data. Another thing I just kind of want to throw in here. So if you came here to learn about cloud stuff and now your brain is like, I'm tired of hearing about cloud stuff. I want my availability to be better, but I don't want to mess with anything cloud-wise. Keep an eye on this feature. ADR will come in SQL Server 2019, and basically what it does, and the last bullet says instantaneous transaction rollback. It's close. It's not quite true, but it looks a lot like magic when it happens. So no more will a long-running transaction derail, failovers, and things like that while you wait for it to clear. They've put a lot of work in where your recovery might just take a couple seconds instead of a couple minutes. So what can we walk away from here knowing? So we can walk away. We need to communicate within our team. Everything we just talked about, everybody needs to understand why we've made that choice, how it works, how to test failovers and maintenance and all those sorts of things. For a lot of these, for a lot of what we talked about, we have to deal with Windows, networking, maybe storage, all those folks. So we need to communicate with all those teams and say, here's what we want to do, here's why, here's your role, and kind of take that lead. Because we're the ones that are going to be blamed when it goes down, because it's always the database is down. Nobody cares what component broke, whether it's yours or theirs. Set those expectations for everybody, management team, budget-wise, uptime-wise, all that. And there's no perfect answer for every. So if somebody comes to you and says, you should always use always-on AGs to maximize uptime, not necessarily true. If somebody comes to you and says, you should always use Azure SQL DB managed instance, maybe not. But it's important to be aware of everything that's out there, how they can kind of interplay with each other, and then construct the solution that's right for you and your team. So that's basically it. I think I came in right on time. Jason, I've got a couple minutes if folks want to hang around for questions. If not, we can end it now. But these are all the ways to contact me.
Okay. Yeah, we don't have very many questions. The one question that we do have is, what about Azure SQL managed instances for business critical?
Well, that's a broad topic.
Yeah.
So the knock on managed instance is I love the technology. Again, if you want all the flexibility that like that always on availability group structure gives you, and you don't want the management headache, that can be a great option. Managed instance is not cheap. So you can go to the pricing calculator to get, the most recent prices. But if money's no object, I would look at moving a lot of stuff to managed instance and those higher tiers if you need to crank performance out of them, but you do pay for that. So I'm not going to sit here and say everybody should do it because it's not in everybody's budget.
All right, great. Cool, and that is all the questions that we actually had for today.
Okay.
So with that, I'm going to get things closed out here. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Thanks, Matt, for doing the presentation, and look forward to having everyone back tomorrow for Stream Analytics. Thanks.